Welcome to the Umbra Vortex, where whispers begin and screams never end. Beyond this point, only madness awaits. This isn't a place for comfort, only for truth. Not the kind found in books or muttered in confession, but a raw, unfiltered reality, cloaked in shadow, stitched with dread, and pulsing just beneath the skin of sanity. I'm Edward J. Hallow, and I'll be the last voice you hear before the silence consumes you. Tonight, you'll hear a tale that begins in velvet drawing rooms and ends in blood-soaked silence. A story about the masks we wear, the people we trust, and the promises that become shackles. It's about the seduction of evil, and how it never arrives with fangs bared. Sometimes it arrives dressed impeccably, with a wine glass in hand. This is the story of the vampire, and once you've heard it, you may never trust a stranger again. It began, as these things so often do, with a man who didn't belong. He appeared in London like a shadow falling quietly across the city. No one knew exactly where he'd come from, only that he moved among the elite with eerie ease. Lord Ruthven was his name. A man of striking presence, tall, pale, elegant. His face was smooth and ageless, his eyes a bottomless dark. He smiled, but never with warmth, and when he looked at you, it felt less like being seen and more like being studied. People whispered. They always do, but the whispers didn't stop the parties, the invitations, the admiration, because Ruthven was magnetic. In every room, he drew attention, like a flame draws moths. Even those who distrusted him couldn't stay away. And young Aubrey? Aubrey was no exception. He was bright, idealistic, full of dreams of adventure and virtue. The moment he met Ruthven, he was captivated. They talked late into the night about morality, fate, human weakness. Aubrey believed he'd found a man of great depth, a misunderstood genius. He was wrong. Soon after, Ruthven agreed to accompany Aubrey on a journey across Europe. Aubrey was elated. What better way to escape the grey weight of English society than in the company of a man so fascinating, so full of mystery? But from the moment they boarded the ship, something shifted. The wind turned sharp, unnatural. The sky seemed perpetually overcast, even on fair days, and wherever Ruthven set foot, shadows lengthened. In Paris, they attended a lavish soirée thrown by a minor noble. Wine flowed, music filled the marble halls, and the scent of jasmine clung to the air. But the next morning, one of the guests, a man known for his charm and wealth, was simply gone. His rooms left untouched, his bed unslept in. All that remained was a single card left on the table, marked only with a blood-red symbol no one recognized. Ruthven, of course, said nothing, but Aubrey noticed the faint smirk at the corner of his lips, as if he knew more than he let on. In Naples it was worse. A beautiful widow, bold and vibrant, crossed paths with Ruthven in the gardens of their hotel. They spoke for no more than an hour. No one heard what he said to her, but by nightfall, her laughter had turned to tears. She fled the city days later, disgraced, her fortune mysteriously gone, her name whispered like a warning in drawing rooms. When Aubrey asked Ruthven if he'd been involved, he only shrugged and said, "She mistook love for a game. I simply ended it." But it was in Rome that the mask truly slipped, and the darkness beneath revealed itself. They were staying in a villa on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by old olive groves and the ruins of forgotten temples. Among the guests was a girl, no more than 16, delicate and radiant, with a voice like birdsong. She was the daughter of a family friend, full of innocence and quiet intelligence. Aubrey had always been fond of her, protective even. One afternoon, He found her in tears beneath the cypress trees, her dress askew, her hands trembling. When he asked what had happened, she couldn't bring herself to speak. But he already knew. Ruthven was nearby, leaning against a column, with a glass of dark red wine in his hand, watching the scene like a man admiring a painting. Aubrey's blood ran cold. He stormed toward him, fury burning through his chest. "What did you do to her?" he demanded. Ruthven didn't flinch. He didn't even pretend to be surprised. He simply took a sip of his wine, looked Aubrey in the eye, and said, in that calm, velvet voice, "She wanted to fall. I gave her a push. There was no remorse, no shame, only cold amusement." It was then that Aubrey truly saw it, the absence behind the man's eyes, the void where a soul should be. It wasn't just corruption. It was hunger. It was then that Aubrey left him, disgusted, disillusioned, and alone. He didn't say goodbye. He simply packed his things under the cover of night and vanished from Ruthven's side, as if distance could wash away what he'd seen, what he now knew. He fled to Greece, seeking solitude among the sun-drenched ruins and quiet olive groves that dotted the hills like sleeping gods. The countryside welcomed him with open arms, warm breezes through ancient trees, the sound of cicadas at dusk, and the ever-present hum of a land older than time. The air was different here, cleaner, softer, untouched by the rot that clung to Ruthven like a second skin. In a quiet coastal village, nestled between the sea and a wall of rugged mountains, Aubrey found a small inn run by a kindly family. And it was there he met Ianthe. She was unlike anyone he had known. Young, but with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of generations. Her laughter came easily, her hands always busy with the work of the inn. And yet, in stolen moments beneath the bougainvillea vines, she would sit beside Aubrey and tell him stories. Folk tales passed down from her grandmother. Stories of spirits and curses, of ancient gods and monstrous things that still roamed the earth under the cloak of darkness. And with her, slowly, Aubrey began to mend. The nightmares that had plagued him since leaving Rome grew quieter. The weight on his chest lightened. For the first time in weeks, he slept without waking in a cold sweat. But peace is always temporary, especially for those marked by the unnatural. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon and painted the sky in blood and gold, Ianthe brought him a glass of sweet wine and sat close. Her voice was low, almost hesitant. "There's something I should tell you," she said. "A story. One we only whisper around here." Aubrey turned to her, smiling gently. "Another legend?" She nodded, her expression suddenly serious. "This one is older. Older than the church bells. Older than the stones in the ground." And then she told him of a creature the villagers feared, a being called the Vricolakus. The name itself was a shiver. A walking corpse, they said, cursed to wander after death, wearing its human face like a mask, feeding on blood, thriving in darkness, luring the living with charm and beauty, only to leave ruin in its wake. It was said they could pass as men, even noblemen, that they seduced the innocent, corrupted the good, and left nothing but hollowed-out bodies behind. "Tall," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "pale as moonlight, with eyes like glass, cold, dark, and empty." Aubrey's blood ran cold. Tall, pale, eyes like glass. The description was too exact, too perfect. It was Ruthven. Every detail matched. Every word felt like a nail hammered into a coffin that had been waiting for him all along. But that was impossible, wasn't it? Ruthven was strange. Yes. Cruel, certainly. Perhaps even evil. But this? A vampire? And yet, Aubrey's mind reeled. He remembered the gamblers who vanished, the ruined women, the way Ruthven had never seemed to sleep, how light seemed to bend around him, how even the midday sun never quite touched his skin. The coldness of his presence, the way animals shrank from him, and his eyes, those eyes that stared not at people, but through them, as if they were already dead. Aubrey tried to laugh, to shake it off as superstition, as the kind of tale villagers pass down to explain the things they fear. But deep down, something had already shifted. A seed of dread had taken root in his soul, because for the first time he truly believed the impossible, and the night suddenly felt much darker. Then came the night of the storm. Aubrey left Ianthe briefly to fetch something from the village. When he returned, he found her body sprawled on the stone floor of an old shrine. Her throat was torn open, her face locked in terror. Beside her, an ornate dagger. Aubrey was attacked too, left for dead, but survived. Barely. Days later, feverish and trembling, he awoke in bed, and Ruthven was sitting beside him. He claimed he'd just arrived. He smiled, but Aubrey couldn't breathe, because among Ruthven's things was the sheath to the dagger found by Ianthe's body. Still, Ruthven helped him recover, nursed him, protected him. And when they were well enough to travel again, they took to the road. That's when the ambush happened. A group of bandits descended on their camp. Ruthven fought, but was gravely wounded. Dying, he pulled Aubrey close, and with a chilling calm, he made him swear an oath to speak of nothing that had happened, not a word about Ruthven or his death, for 1 year and 1 day. Aubrey, overwhelmed and grieving, agreed. Ruthven smiled and died laughing. He was buried on the roadside, and Aubrey, shattered, returned to London. But the nightmare wasn't over. Months later, at a crowded party, he saw a familiar silhouette across the room. Tall, pale, impeccably dressed, Lord Ruthven, alive, untouched, smiling. Aubrey recoiled in horror, but Ruthven approached and whispered, "You made an oath." Bound by that cursed promise, Aubrey said nothing, even as Ruthven slithered back into London society, even as he was embraced once more by those who should have known better. And then came the worst news of all. Ruthven had inherited an earldom, and he was engaged to Aubrey's sister. Aubrey begged her to delay the wedding, pleaded with her. But how could he explain? How do you tell someone that the man they love is a centuries-old creature of the night, wearing a human mask? She thought he was losing his mind. Maybe he was. As the day of the wedding approached, Aubrey broke. He suffered a nervous collapse, followed by a stroke. And finally, on the day the oath was set to expire, as the church bells rang in celebration, Aubrey, weak, trembling, dying, told everything. But it was too late. His sister had already said, "I do." They found her body the next morning, pale, lifeless, 2 tiny puncture wounds on her neck. Ruthven was gone, vanished. Some say he moved to another city. Some believe he changed his name, his face, his story, but all agree on one thing. He still walks among us, waiting, watching, hunting. You won't know him when you see him. He might smile at you in a bar, or offer you help in a bookstore. He'll seem kind, curious, cultured, but his eyes will be cold, and if you look long enough, they'll look right through you, because Lord Ruthven doesn't feed on blood alone. He feeds on trust, on beauty, on those who believe they're too clever to fall for evil. Aubrey believed that too, until the end. And if you ever feel drawn to someone without knowing why, someone who seems flawless, almost unreal, be careful. Desire can be dangerous, and some promises should never be made. This was the vampire, because some things were never meant to die. I'm Edward J. Hallow, and if the night calls to you, look twice. Some secrets are best left buried, and the darkness never blinks.